and I'm just here to discuss movies on the YT. And if you'd like to join that discussion, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well. And today I just felt like sharing my most anticipated movies of 2021, which is kind of going to be another odd year within the movie release world, because you have a bunch of movies from 2020 that got pushed back into 2021, and you have movies that were already scheduled for 2021. It's a pretty packed year altogether. And so there's a lot of movies that would normally make this list that probably won't even get an honorable mention, because I didn't want to have too many honorable mentions, but I do have quite a few. And so feel free to share your most anticipated movies as well in the comments. And let's get started. So I'm going to first start by listing off honorable mentions. You can pretty much put any Marvel movie that didn't make the top 10. But I'm going to single out Morbius because I really enjoyed that trailer that they released about a year ago. Then we got some horror movies, sequels like Quiet Place Part 2, which I wasn't, even though I think A Quiet Place is a fantastic movie, I wasn't as big of a fan of it as everybody else. But this Part 2 trailer I thought looked amazing. And it has Cillian Murphy in it, who I think is one of the most underrated actors out there. And then you also have The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And if James Wan was returning to direct this movie, it might have cracked my top 10. But he's not returning. And I don't necessarily think the director they got has the best track record. And then we also have the Texas Chainsaw movie, which is my favorite franchise. And normally, in a normal year, this would crack the top 10 pretty easily. But this isn't a normal year. It's one of my favorite franchises, but as of late, it hasn't had necessarily the best track record. And even the behind-the-scenes stuff, they changed directors last minute after they had already started shooting and stuff. And so there's just some issues like that knock it out off the list. And then we've got some action movies with Infinite, which is the new Antoine Fuqua film, and he's always a nice action director. You've got Red Notice, which I'm looking forward to, which has Dwayne Johnson in it, and I believe it's a Netflix movie as well. You've got Army of the Dead, which I'm pretty excited for, because I'm a big fan of Zack Snyder pre-DCEU, stuff like Watchmen and Dawn of the Dead and 300, but I wasn't the biggest fan of his DCEU movies. And I've kind of just wanted him to kind of get out of that. And that's why I'm very excited to see Army of the Dead, because it's just kind of him returning to BVS. And I'm just kind of excited to see what that is. And then lastly, we've got Uncharted, which I'm very intrigued by. I'm planning on trying to play through the games as well, because I think the storyline itself I'm going to be very intrigued by, and I'm kind of excited to see it. Even though I've been told that Tom Holland's not necessarily the best casting for this role, I'm still very intrigued to see what this movie has to offer. And then we have Mission Impossible 7, which in a normal year, once again, would probably easily crack my top 10. But it doesn't, and that's simply because Mission Impossible movies I can pretty much anticipate being great movies and being among my favorites of the year. That being said, the storylines aren't always the most interesting to me. And then the last honorable mention I'm going to throw in here is West Side Story, which was one of my most anticipated movies last year, which is now this year. And it's a Steven Spielberg remake of maybe my second favorite or third favorite musical. Grease is my favorite, but West Side Story's right up there as well. And so cracking off the top 10, we have Dune. Now, last year this was very high up, but it's fallen a little bit simply because of the packed schedule. And the reason it only comes in at 10 is simply I'm not entirely sure what to expect. We have a trailer and stuff, but this is kind of a very deep storyline, and I don't entirely know what to anticipate from it because I haven't read the book, nor have I seen the 80s movie, but I'm going to try and watch it before this comes out. But it has a phenomenal cast. It has Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, who's probably my favorite actress right now. It's got Jason Momoa, who I'm a massive fan of, and Oscar Isaac. It's got a loaded cast. Plus, it's got a great director in Denis Villeneuve. Coming in at number 9 is Spiral, the Book of Saw. I'm not a big fan of the Saw franchise, in all honesty. I love James Wan, but the Saw franchise, out of the 3 franchises he kind of helped create, that's easily my least favorite. But the trailer to this movie had me very intrigued. I kind of like the whole direction they seem to be going with this. And I was a little skeptical when it was like Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson doing it. But seeing the trailer, I kind of understand why they did it. And I think it has the potential to be like the next Get Out, which I know is very high expectation, but I just really enjoyed the trailer. And coming in at number 8 is the untitled Elvis Presley Project. That's what IMDb listed it as. And I'm just kind of a guy that loves to watch musician biopics, even though they're not necessarily among my favorite movies of all time. They're always kind of in there as like my favorite movies of their years. And Elvis Presley, I don't think he's had a biopic, maybe I'm wrong, since like the Kurt Russell one. I'm just kind of excited to see what this has to offer and seeing how they go about making this Elvis Presley biopic, especially since he grew up in especially since it'll take place in like the 50s and 60s. And I'm just kind of curious to see how they handle the time period and handle the character of Elvis. And coming in at number 7 is Black Widow. This was a lot higher on my list last year, but it gets knocked down for 2 reasons. One, the stacked schedule of 2021, but the other reason is I've kind of just lost interest. I loved the trailers. I think the premise is great, but I don't know, it feels a little too late at times to do a Black Widow movie, and just the delays that the movie has had has kind of added to that, so it's been knocked down from being like number 2 to being here at number 7. And coming in at number 6 is Space Jam: A New Legacy. I am a massive fan. Maybe it's probably all nostalgia, but I love that first Space Jam movie. I've watched it a ton of times, especially when I was younger. And I'm just a big Looney Tunes fan as well. And I think it's a concept that warrants itself to be kind of a generational thing where you can have like a reboot every 20 years or so for a new generation, because there's always going to be that next great basketball star that you can throw in there. And so I just think the concept itself works very well to have like a reboot type of thing. And I know this is not going to be like an Oscar-winning movie or anything like that. It's just, overall, I just love Space Jam and I love the Looney Tunes, and I'm just very excited to see what they do with it with LeBron James and everything. And coming in at number 5 is F9. Now, I am a massive fan of Fast and Furious franchise. It's a franchise that is very near and dear to my heart. I grew up alongside it. I've been watching the movies for almost as long as I can remember, whether it's through DVRing them on cable or seeing like 5 and Up in the theaters opening night. It's just a franchise that I just kind of grew up alongside and have a lot of love for. But I'm not necessarily, the franchise itself isn't going to ever be kind of top 3 anticipated of their years, simply because personally I feel like they could have ended at 7, and I wasn't a big fan of 8. Now 9 I think has potential to be pretty good with some of the stuff I've seen in the trailers. And this really just comes in at number 5 simply because of the franchise itself. I kind of just look forward to seeing what it has to offer. And coming in at number 4 is No Time to Die. This is actually significantly higher for me than it would have been last year, simply because I've recently started watching through the James Bond movies leading up to No Time to Die, because it was the biggest hole in the action movies that I've seen. Because I've seen pretty much every other action franchise and even modern spy franchise. I've seen pretty much all of those movies, but for some reason I never got around to watching James Bond movies. But since I started watching them, I've been a pretty big fan of the franchise from what I have seen. You know, the Sean Connery movies, especially the George Lazenby movie, and a couple of the Roger Moore movies. I haven't made it to any others, but it's kind of elevated my excitement level for having this 25th movie, just because I've become a massive fan fairly quickly over the last couple of months. And kicking off the top 3, I have Without Remorse, which is a movie that's probably significantly higher for me than most other people. And that's because probably the first spy franchise, or full spy franchise, because you could argue Triple X, but the first kind of real spy franchise, in my opinion, that I saw every movie of was the Jack Ryan franchise. And you have a great TV show nowadays, but I kind of miss the theatrically released Jack Ryan. And even though this is not technically a Jack Ryan movie, it's based off of a novel, which is also called Without Remorse, that was a spin-off of the Jack Ryan novels. And so I don't necessarily know if this will tie into other Jack Ryan stuff, particularly the TV show or not, but I just kind of like the idea of possibly returning to the world of Jack Ryan in movie form. And I think Michael B. Jordan is a great actor that has potential to be a big action star. And coming in at number 2 is Cherry. Now, this is a movie directed by the Russo brothers, starring Tom Holland, and I'm just extremely excited to see what the Russo brothers do outside of the MCU. I'm a huge fan of Community, which they helped create. Their 4 MCU movies are my top 4 favorite MCU movies. And so I'm kind of really excited to see what they do outside of the MCU. And you have a great cast in this movie as well. And I'm just really excited to see what this movie becomes. Maybe they'll turn out to be terrible directors outside of the MCU. But as of now, Cherry comes in at number 2 for me. And coming in at number 1, my most anticipated movie of 2021 is The Suicide Squad. Now, I'm a fan of the Suicide Squad concept. I wasn't the biggest fan of that first movie, but I was a fan of the cast. And you have Margot Robbie returning in this. And the thing that really elevates this for me, outside of just the cast in general, is James Gunn. I think he's the perfect choice to direct a Suicide Squad movie. And that little behind the scenes teaser thing we got at DC Fandom, I thought showed that he understands the tone and aesthetic that the Suicide Squad should go for. And it just made this movie my most anticipated movie. Now, this was number 2 on this list, but then The Batman got delayed to 2022, which jumped the Suicide Squad up to number 1. Thanks for watching this video. Go ahead and share your most anticipated movies in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed my picks, go ahead and smash that thumbs up icon and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well. And I will return next time when I see you again.